All right, good morning. I want to invite you to turn over to the book of Revelation this morning, chapter 13. We're near the end of that this morning. Just a few final remarks on this chapter before we get into chapter 14. For those who are visiting with us this morning, as we've gone through the book of Revelation and continue to make our way through it, the key thing for us always that we come back to is to remember that this is a book of assurance to the people of God. There's nothing in this book that should unsettle us. Now, we may be a little unsettled by the fact that we have some difficulty understanding the images if we're not real familiar, especially with Old Testament literature that helps us unlock the keys to what the images represent. But for the most part, we should recognize that whatever we're seeing here and these big pictures that God is painting for us are meant to give us assurance, give us confidence that God is on His throne, the Lamb at His right hand also reigning victoriously over the earth, over the enemies of God's people, and over us. Judgment is coming for those that oppose the will of God, deliverance for those who have surrendered and worshiped the Lamb and follow Him. That's the big message of this book. So as we look at these pictures, hopefully that's what we're drawing from it. The details often we're not spending a lot of time on. We can discuss those. We may have differences of opinions, but if you're getting the big picture that we are trying to paint here, then you're going to be doing, I think, just fine. As we've looked at the chapter 13, we've had an image of the dragon, of course, who is Satan, and then his allies. In chapter 12, Satan tried to swallow up or destroy the woman. She was going to swallow the child that she was about to bear, that clearly is representing the Christ, and fails to do that. He goes up into heaven where the child has ascended and is cast down by Michael, and so he fails again. He goes after the woman, and the earth swallows up the river that he sends out after her, and so he fails again. And now he comes after the children of the women. That would be us. Now he's turned his attention to the people of God. That's really the symbolism there. And so he calls his allies now to assist him, and that's the beast out of the sea, the beast out of the earth, and then there's an image that we've seen at the end of that, and all of this representing the earthly powers that Satan influences to accomplish his purpose in the world. And there's been a big parallel between the images, I think, of the beast and the image of the beast and what we've seen earlier about the Lamb and those that follow Him. See a parallel here because it's the kingdoms of the world against the kingdom of God. It's God against the gods that men have invented and make and that Satan uses to accomplish his purpose in the world. That's the big picture of what we're seeing here. Now, after we were finishing up last week, we talked about the signs that he performs in verse 14. Well, the signs are not miraculous signs that God would, but false wonders. Just as the wise men who served Pharaoh during the time of Moses performed false wonders, but they were no match ultimately for what God accomplished through Moses. But the main thing that I believe he's talking about here is not so much any kind of sleight of hand or mysterious things that the charlatans of the Roman religions might have done. As I'm looking at the big picture of this, the main sign of this chapter was the resurrection of the beast. You remember he had an injury that was a mortal wound, and it looked like he was dead, but he lives. So that has the appearance as though this beast is what? Indestructible. He lives. So the parallel between Christ and His resurrection and the beast to me is pretty clear, that here is this powerful beast that that everyone thought he was dead, but he's not dead. He rises again. Just as empires sometimes go through difficult times, it looks like, well, that empire is about to end, and then all of a sudden a competent ruler comes along that's able to, through his wisdom and force and gathering of the military prowess that he uses, the empire's reestablished again, and the strength of it. That's, to me, the imagery that is being used here, which is exactly what happened under Domitian in terms of the empire looked like it was in a shambles. Emperors coming and going, and then he comes on the scene and reestablishes the empire, rebuilds it, and has some important conquest, reinstates a lot of the old ways, which is one of the reasons that the church was being persecuted by Domitian. But that's the main sign that I think you see in this chapter. But when you think about empires and their wonders, to me, one day a whole city is leveled by the power of the beast. And then the next day, a city's built. Maybe not in a day, but you see all of these Roman cities throughout the empire, Caesarea, and others that Rome had built throughout Corinth and different ones by the power of Rome. So to wipe out a city, they build up a city. You look at the power of the beast and you say, wow, how incredible. So those are things only a God can do. They're beyond the power of a mere man. So the point that I think that we're seeing here is the power and wealth and might of the beast that is being displayed, that awes the earthling and those who worship it. And those who serve the beast are blessed by it. And those who do not are cursed by it. He even makes fire come down out of the sky to the earth in the presence of the people. Again, that's only something a God can do. Maybe it's an image in terms of some kind of military weapon that was used. That's not really the point. To me, it harkens back to what? In the Old Testament. What? Sodom and Gomorrah? Many instances. Baal and the prophets of Baal, fire comes down out of heaven. The point would be, this is something only a God can do. This is this is the God of the earth that we're seeing here, and His allies. So it was given to Him to give breath to the image of the beast. This is verse 15. So that the image of the beast would even speak and cause all those who do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And He causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, and the free and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hands and on their foreheads. And He decrees that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Well, a lot is said many times about the mark of the beast, and later we're going to see 666, and movies are made, of course, and the Antichrist has this somewhere hidden in his hair or wherever it may be, and that this is all time. That's not at all what John is trying to talk about here. And as you're reading this, it may well be, and in fact, a couple of us talking after class, it may be the imagery is chosen because of some of the images that were made that were at the shrines of the gods, that the priest could speak from his secret place, and it would appear that the image itself was speaking. That may be true. So, in fact, LJ said he was at such a shrine, and they were able to kind of show that, and you can imagine the wonder of someone standing before this. It seems like the image is speaking. But more importantly, so while I think that may draw on what was happening, the image is speaking for the beast. Rome carries the voice, the message, the power of Rome. And of course, the temples that were built to the gods, especially those that were built to honor the emperor, they represented the message of the empire. They promoted the belief system of the empire. They reinforced the customs and the goals and all of the things that were offered by the empire. They were the messaging system, and they had the authority of the empire behind them. And that's what's being emphasized here. So that if you bowed at the temples and you were approved, now whether or not they actually received a token, something like it's been compared to a credit card or an ID card, something that would say you were a bona fide temple worshiper or emperor worship, or whether you got some kind of tattoo or mark or symbol on you. I can't find any real verification of how this was done. But what was clear enough is it was easy enough to distinguish between those who were emperor worshipers and the worshipers of the Roman gods and those who did not, especially those who were worshipers of Jesus Christ and the one true God. Not hard to distinguish because they wouldn't bow down. They wouldn't burn incense. They wouldn't say Caesar is Lord God. They wouldn't do those things. It was not that hard to distinguish between them. And the point here is that there were consequences to rejecting the worship of the image of the beast and the beast. If you did not fall into line, if you were not part of the system of Rome, if you didn't endorse the message of Rome and the values of Rome, what was the consequence? Yeah, you could die. At the end, you very likely could die. But a lot of people did die, but not everyone died, but there were still consequences. You could be thrown in prison. You could lose your property. You might lose your job. You might lose your ability to buy and sell if you were a merchant. You may not be a merchant that was favored by Rome, and so you weren't able to do business. You might even be able not to buy in the marketplace the things that you needed to live. So the consequences of rejecting the system, that's what's being emphasized in this verse here. If you don't bow down to the beast and the image of the beast, then there are going to be consequences that are going to come as a result of that. So it's the beast then. So if you do bow down, what do you get to do? What do you receive? All those benefits. See, the beast blesses and the beast curses. You see all these parallels with God Himself in this. The beast gives you life, or it can take your life. It gives you freedom, or it takes your freedom. It gives you economic wealth, or it takes away wealth. It does all of those things. That's the power of this beast and the image of the beast, at least as it appears. At least as it's seen. All of that being false, because God is the one, whether you're a beast worshiper or not, He's the one who gives life and breath to all things. All the things that we enjoy that sustain life, He gives. He's the one that is to be honored for those things. He's the one who is the giver of blessing, and then ultimately the one to whom men answer for the decisions that they made. But these are the false wonders and the dragon's allies, and here is what it appears to be to those that worship. So the last verse, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. My guess is that if you walked around and you asked people what's the number, satanic number of the beast or the Antichrist. You might have to at least say that. Most everybody would be able to tell you 666. Or if you just gave them that number, what is the significance of 666? They could tell you that's the Satan number. They know that. They don't know anything else, but they know that's a bad number. It's a bad thing. Well, what's he saying here? If it were the number of Christ and his followers, what would the number be? You can calculate that even though it hadn't been given. 777 wouldn't be hard. 777, the 7 being the divine number, the number of perfection, the number we've seen throughout this. That is the number that God uses to signify completeness and perfection for Him. 777, the heavenly things. But what falls short of that? 6. And so this is just that being multiplied, being emphasized. 666, a magnification of humanity with its devotion to evil and its rejection of God. That's what's being talked about here. Those with understanding. Those with understanding are those who can see the beast for what it is. That's who they are. They're the ones who are able to see this is not a true and living God. This is not what it claims or appears to be. Those that have wisdom are able to see this is a product of Satan, doing the will of Satan in the earth. They're able to see it for what it is. That's what it means. It's not saying you have to have some formula in your head that you can figure out something to count. That's not, he's saying those who have understanding are able to see the beast for what it is. They're able to recognize what it is. It's a liar. It's a false god that performs false wonders and makes false promises and opposes the true and living God and His kingdom. That's what they're able to see. So, just summarizing this chapter, what are we being told? Your adversary is evil as opposed to good. Your adversary spreads lies as opposed to the truth. Your adversary is human, of the earth, as opposed to divine. So don't have anything to do with serving him. That's what we're being told here. Don't be deceived. Be faithful to the Lord. So chapter 12, we've said the woman is in labor. The dragon tries to thwart God's purpose and he fails. So after failing and he comes after the followers of the Lamb, chapter 13, he's calling his 2 allies together, the sea beast and the earth beast. And they together represent the military power and wealth of Rome. And then you have the image of the beast, who is the false religion of Rome, paganism, emperor worship, but more than that. When I talk about the false religion of Rome, false religion is summarized for us in Romans 1. False religion, the false religion of Rome, the false religion of the world in America, wherever it can be found, is Romans 1. It begins with the rejection of the true and living God. It begins then with swallowing the lies that have poured out from the dragon from the very beginning. That's where it begins with making our own gods up of the things that we see all around us and worshiping the things of the earth, and especially exalting man, if we're able, to the place of God. All of those things. It certainly results in immoral activity because we've rejected God's truth regarding our purpose and who we are. All those things were taking place in Rome. And what we're seeing in the world today is not anything new. Nothing new about it. It's exactly the same offering that you find. And I'm telling you, if you're wondering as you think about today and what you're seeing, are there consequences happening to people who are saying, I won't worship at that altar. It's a false altar, and what's being said by those promoting it is a lie. It's not the truth. Some people losing their ability to earn, to buy and sell. You don't wear their flag. You don't wear their symbols. You don't promote it. You say, I don't believe that because it's opposed to what I think the Bible says. It's opposed to my faith. Are they given then paths to say, oh, well, if that's your faith in God and then that's fine. You hold that. That's okay. Oh, no, you're hateful. You're awful. Yeah, how can you have that? That's what we're seeing today. It's not that difficult. You don't have to have a mark, but you can be marked as you are a follower, not a follower of the beast. You don't believe in our system. And you are not going to be acceptable. So be ready for this, brethren. Be ready for it. And you're going to have to decide, do you want the blessings of the beast or do you want the blessings of the true and living God? And are you willing to accept whatever it is that may come as a result of bowing at the altar of Jesus Christ and surrendering to Him? Or would you choose to be blessed by the beast and his image? That's got to be something that we're considering as we're seeing this take place. That's what's happening here. Anybody have a comment before we get to chapter 14? So where was John, I believe it's the dragon there. The dragon is standing where? In chapter 13? On the seashore. And he calls up his allies. That's the picture. This chapter, as it begins, the shift, it makes me more convinced it's the dragon. It isn't John, it's the dragon on the seashore. And he's calling up his allies. Because when you come to this point in the book, and I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion. And with him 144,000 having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. So now he sees another one standing, not on the shores, not on the sand, but on a mountain, on Mount Zion in particular. And of course, Mount Zion, why is it significant? What's on Mount Zion? The temple. The tabernacle before the temple. The temple is built on Mount Zion. Now, there were actually two mountains there. There was Mount Moriah and Mount Zion, but they both came to be referred to as just Mount Zion. And on Mount Zion is where the temple ultimately stood. This is the city of David. It was thought to be an impregnable fortress, and then David is able to conquer it, and there it becomes his city. And prophetically, it becomes a symbol for the new Jerusalem that's going to come, the new temple that is going to be built. And the word of the Lord is going to go forth from Zion, from Jerusalem, from this new city that God promises in the Messianic kingdom. So if you go back to Isaiah chapter 2, in the what? When is it going to happen? The last days. In the last days, then the Lord's going to pour forth His Spirit. In the last days, all nations are going to be called to the mount of the house of the Lord. That's Zion. It's where His temple. All the nations are streaming to the temple. That's Isaiah 2 in verses 1 through 4. And in Joel 2, it's in the last days, God's going to pour forth His Spirit upon mankind. And it's to Joel that Peter refers in Acts chapter 2 and says, this, when the Spirit falls on them and they begin to announce the gospel of Christ, he says, this is what Joel was talking about. Here it is. This is that. Now when anybody comes along and says, well, it hadn't happened yet, then they are arguing with the Holy Spirit through the mouth of Peter. Peter says, this is it. The Messianic King is on His throne and His kingdom is spreading. They don't either understand what's happened. They don't recognize the nature of the kingdom that Christ has created and they can't see, they don't see what it is that God has done. They're missing something important. But you can be sure this is that. The Hebrew writer in chapter 1 in verses 1 and 2 says, in times past God spoke to in many portions and in many ways through the prophets. But he says what? In these last days He's spoken to us how? In His Son. So these are the last days. Make no mistake about it. 1 Peter 2 in verses 4 through 6 quotes from Isaiah 28. And he says, coming to Him as to a living stone, which has been rejected by men, but as a choice and precious in the sight of God, you also as living stones are being built into a spiritual house, that's the temple, for a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ, for this is contained in Scripture. Behold, I lay in Zion a choice stone, a precious cornerstone, and he who believes in Him will not be disappointed. And then one last passage, or couple, in Isaiah 59 verse 20, Paul quotes that in Romans 11:26. The deliverer or redeemer will come to Zion and He will remove ungodliness from Jacob. Speaking of Christ. And then finally, Zechariah 9 in verses 9 and 10. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will cut off from the chariot from Ephraim, the horse from Jerusalem, and the bow of war will be cut off, and he will speak peace to the nations, and his dominion will be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. Well, when was that quoted as being fulfilled? The triumphal entry, when Jesus comes into Jerusalem on the foal of a donkey. That's the reference here. Here's the king that was coming and ultimately would be enthroned by His death, burial, and resurrection, which if you were in our Psalms class, I won't take time, but read Psalm 2. The nations were in a rage and an uproar. They were opposed to God and His king. And yet the Lord laughs. He says, as for me, I've installed my king where? His holy mountain, on Mount Zion. That's where the king is being pictured here. This is all the imagery that's being drawn on now in Revelation chapter 14. So who's with the king? We've already seen this number before earlier in the book. Now we come back to it. A little more detail given about them, but the 144,000. And what do they have? As opposed to the number of the beast, they've got His name. They've got His name and the name of His Father on their foreheads. And all that's saying is those that have the mark of the beast are those that belong to the beast. The devil knows those that are his, and the Lord knows those that are His, those that belong to Him. Remember, they've already been sealed. They were already identified. God knows who we are. He knows who you serve. He knows that you belong to Him. You don't have anything to fear then from the dragon and the beast, because the Lord knows who you are. This 144,000, again, a symbolic number, 12 times 12, or the religious number, 10, a complete number times 10 times 10 times, just a magnification of those numbers to say it's complete. It's a full number. I think it represents the church on the earth at any given time, as opposed to the myriads and myriads who are going to be in heaven. Just a symbol for the church on earth. Others would say, no, it's all the saints. It makes no difference. Hey, you draw your own opinion. Don't get lost in the detail. Don't spend a lot of time. It's the Lord's people. You can be sure of that. And the Hebrew writer insists in Hebrews chapter 12 that he says, you have come where? To Mount Zion. He says, you've come to Mount Zion in the Lord. And that's verse 22. And to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to myriads of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and the spirits of righteous men made perfect, to Jesus the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood which speaks better than the blood of Abel, that blood that called for vengeance. Here is a blood that calls for salvation, for redemption. Verse 28, therefore, since we receive a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us show gratitude by which we may offer to God an acceptable service with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. These are the saints of God. This is the church. Where do they come from? Every tribe and tongue and nation and people. What are they purchased by? Blood of the Lamb. It's clear who they are. It should be clear. So Revelation 13, those who have the mark of the beast are under the protection of the beast. If you have the beast mark, the beast's not going to hurt you. And he's going to persecute those that don't have the mark. In chapter 14, by contrast, those who have the mark of the Lamb, those who have the name of the Lamb and His Father, they come under the protection of the Lamb and God. And those who don't have it are going to be judged by the Lamb. So that's the issue now. As we're going to study this chapter, that's the decision you're faced with. Whose mark do you want? Who do you want to belong to? You want to belong to the earth? You want to serve the dragon? You want to have the mark of the beast? Is that what you're in pursuit of? Or do you want to belong to the Lamb and bear His name and follow Him? That's the challenge before us. If you follow the beast, then the beast will bless and provide for you. That's at least the imagery. Follow the Lamb, He'll bless and provide for you. For those who gathered here, we've chosen to follow the Lamb. That's who we trust and who we worship. And this message in this book is for us, the saints of God. And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, like the sound of thunder. Well, what does that sound? I'm going to stop right there. The sound of many waters and the sound of thunder. How would you feel right now if all of a sudden you heard the sound of many waters and the sound of thunder? Yeah, what is that? That should be our reaction, but John says, and the voice I heard, because it's a voice, was the sound of harpists playing on their harps. You ever heard a harp? What's that sound? How's that? Oh, yeah, that's nice. That's good. That's the point. This is a voice that is a voice of judgment, but for John, for you, for me, it's a soothing sound. It's calming. You don't have anything to fear from this voice that's calling out. Because we are the servants of the Most High. This is our Father that's talking. We don't have anything to fear when He speaks. There's nothing threatening to John. There's nothing threatening to these 144,000 that hear this voice. It's inviting. And in response, they sang a new song. They hear the sound of this voice. They sing a song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been purchased from the earth. When Exodus 15, when the children of Israel were led by Moses in deliverance, Moses sang a new song. When the children of Israel returned from Babylon, we're told that God made a way for them and they were going to declare His praise. There's a song. It's a song of deliverance, a song of rescue. And now there's going to be a new song that's going to be learned by those that are following the Lamb. That's what, and only the 144,000 could learn it. I want to tell you, I've heard some songs that I've wondered, is this the song that they were talking about? Maybe I'm on the outs because I can't learn it. I'm trying to get it. That's That's not the point. It's not the tune here. This is the melody that's being played where? In the heart. It's the song in the heart. Sing and make melody in your heart. Everybody can learn the words we're singing this morning. But the only ones that know the tune that's being played in the heart are those that are following the Lamb and have been rescued by Him. It's only those that have been delivered by the Lamb and know what they've received that learn this song. And we'll talk more about that, God enabling, next week.